What's up, desktopers? Xavier Wills here for Desktop Bodybuilding, and we are back with another episode of Bodybuilding University. And today I'm joined by Stanimal, Stan de Longeaux, Chad Nicholls down there in the bottom corner, and Martin Fitzwater in the other corner at the bottom. And it's going to be a great episode because we've got some listener questions, and obviously Chad Nicholls, the man who's probably prepped more more Olympia champions than anyone outside of maybe Honey Rambod. Now I know you guys are pretty much neck and neck up there for most Olympia titles, around like 20 or something crazy. So I'll quickly go to the other guys first, and we'll get to you, Chad. But Stan, how you doing this week, man? I saw you just sent through a nice little update to me and Marty, looking pretty insane. Literally, Stan. Is anyone not hearing
You're
Stan?
muted, Stan.
Sorry.
Try it again.
Muted my mic. But yeah, I'm doing good. I'm about 10.5 weeks out now from Puerto Rico. And
Oh shit! Okay,
yeah,
that's why you look so crazy.
stuff starts happening, so it's good. It's nice.
Yeah, man. And I think because I think you said you'll post that up tomorrow, I think people are going to be sort of blown away because you were sort of right there last year, placing second, to getting actually into the Mr. Olympia, same as Marty as well. So I think this year, you may well take that step, and I think Puerto Rico is a good show to choose, man. So I'm excited for you.
Thanks, man. Yeah, definitely.
And Marty, how you doing? I've seen obviously updates from you as well, looking good as always. And now you've got the Chromius Domius copying Stan there. What made you do that?
Hey man, it's falling out. It was just time. I could have faked it for a while, but the barber bill was getting expensive. It's a little easier to shave your head and just do it. But yeah, man.
So I'm the only one with hair on this podcast.
Yep.
That's great.
It's the way to go, man.
Yeah.
And I don't have a bad looking bald head. I was a little worried if it was going to look ugly, but it doesn't look too bad, so I don't mind it.
I thought you might have gone down the hair transplant route.
I've looked into it and thought about going to Turkey and stuff, but we'll see. I mean, I don't mind it. It's not too bad for right now, so we'll run it for a little bit.
No, it's good. It's good. But Chad, obviously, man of the episode, you're on the channel, obviously coach of Big Ramy, coach of William Bonac, former coach of, 8-time Mr. Olympia, Ronnie Coleman, which is alone, those three bodybuilders is a very nice resume as a coach, a guru, or whatever people like to refer to you as. But how you been? How's everything going? Obviously coming off that Arnold Classic where many people believe Big Ramy maybe should have got a bit more of a shake, which we'll discuss a little bit more in the episode. But how have you been? How's your health and all that sort of stuff?
Good. Yeah, I wake up every morning, so that's a good day for me.
Positive?
After I went through some shit. But yeah, everything's good right now. Actually back training a little bit. Very little, trying to keep up with the boys a little bit, which is kind of hard to do sometimes. But yeah, I mean, I feel good and all is well.
Yeah, for sure. Now, I wanted to ask you one question off the bat, and you can feel free to absolutely not give no answer or whatever. I can cut this bit out of the podcast, but obviously there's a bit of controversy at the Arnold Classic off stage, as well as, on stage as well for you. So it was a busy weekend, but obviously we heard there's some sort of an altercation. I don't know what the exact details were between you and Shawn Ray. And Shawn Ray's a guy that's gone after you. And I've seen it from the outside looking in, and he is brutal, and he's not a very well liked guy among the industry now. And I think most people sort of say that publicly. But obviously what went down, I believe your son confronted Shawn Ray, and there's video, and there's a whole lot of controversy around that. And you got people on two different sides. You got the people on the side of your son, that's awesome, sticking up for your dad. And for me, when I see that, I'm a father, and I think, geez, if my son did that one day, there would be, my mind would be on two sides. I'd be telling him, hey, maybe, we can go about it a different way. And then the other side would be like, that's my son. So what's your view on it? Because I think there's people split on the opinion of it.
So here's kind of what happened. Obviously everybody knows the beef between me and Shawn. It's been going on for, 20 years, ever since, I started training athletes, and they all started placing ahead of him. So that was kind of, no brainer. And it kind of back and forth. So when I saw Shawn, honestly, I had nothing but like positive thoughts. I was going to be like, hey, listen, man, we need to talk. Let's go and talk. And this, my thinking was, let's just squash this shit. It's all petty nonsense. And he kind of made a smart ass thing like, oh, you got my number. And I'm like, well, we're both here. We go talk now. And I said, so let's just go talk. And so thinking was we'll exit the ballroom because I didn't want to do like in front of everybody. We'll exit the ballroom. We were already at the back. And so I was going to walk out the back doors. And basically what happened was when Shawn realized we were getting ready to exit the ballroom, he stopped and kind of backtracked, and Dom was behind him. But Dom kind of was like, get moving, boy. And then Shawn does Shawn and starts screaming, you know, you're going to go to jail. You want to be arrested. I'm going to end your career, blah, blah, blah. Really, that was kind of the end of it. Like, honestly, that was the end of it. I literally would have not thought another thing about it. But I guess after that, Ron Harris had sent Dom a message and was like, hey, why is Shawn saying you hit him? And Dom's like, what the hell are you talking about? Like, Ron, you were right there. Like, because Ron was literally right there. And he's like, what are you talking about? You were right there. You know I didn't hit him. And he's like, no, that's what I'm saying. Like, why is Shawn saying that? Like, he's completely lying about it. And so that kind of pissed off Dom. And then somebody else came up to him and was like, hey, man, I heard Shawn was ready to go outside with you. Like, he's telling everybody, like, he was ready to go outside. So, okay, so at this point, Dom, I mean, you're talking about a 19-year-old kid, like, and now all these guys are saying, like, oh, this happened and that happened. So now Dom loses his cool a little bit. The next day goes up and decides to confront him. The reason he recorded it was basically so they couldn't say something happened that didn't happen. So that was really all that, you know, was basically being recorded. He went up, basically said, you know, what he said. They recorded it. Again, only reason they recorded it so Shawn couldn't come back and say, oh, well, he was aggressive. He put his hands on me. He done this, he done that. And that was basically it. It was done and over with, you know, at that point, basically.
That adds a lot more clarity to it because I suppose a lot of the narrative you get it, you know, it's thrown around different podcasts and stuff like that. And that's why before I mentioned anything on, I haven't mentioned it on this channel, I don't think once. I wanted to get clarification from you or from Dom or someone because you know, people have said, oh, you know, why would he go and record it so he can post it online and what, you know, all that sort of stuff. And I'm like, it's good to get that clarification, but he wanted it in case something happened or in case something was said because something was said out of, you know.
At the end of the day, Dom's 19, so I'm sure he's thinking like, you know, fuck this, I'll record this and post this.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
You know, but I mean, honestly, it was because he had already started saying stuff that was not true. And so like Dom didn't want to do something. And then all of a sudden, you know, Shawn call up somebody and say like, hey man, he assaulted me at the booth. And, you know, these people were here and they'll testify to it and blah, 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 blah. They just recorded it just to make sure that everybody knew what was on, you know, up and up. That was it.
Yeah. So Marty, how old are you now?
Me? 26.
Yeah. So take yourself back 7 years now. If you were in that same situation that Dom was in, what would you have done? If you know someone was constantly saying stuff about your dad for years, and then you know you were put in that situation where someone said that Shawn was saying, you know, I was ready to go outside when really it was more the opposite.
Yeah, I mean. The only thing I can say is that I respect Shawn as a legend in the sport. But at 19 years old, bro, I'd have kicked his ass. So
that's what I thought the answer was going to be.
Yeah, I mean, not just purely for the fact of sticking up for my dad, but like if you're going to go tell everybody that you were ready to go outside with me, then let's go outside and let's see, you know? I mean, Shawn Ray's got a big ass mouth, man. He was running it when he competed against the guys he competed against and everything. So, yeah, 19 years old, I definitely would have thrown hands at him. You know, hindsight, being 26 years old and knowing the world that we live in, yeah, I could have told you there's going to be 100 videos made about you, whether you threw hands or didn't throw hands. You know what I mean? Like there's things now that shit, I mean, I've just said fucking words online and had 100 videos made about me. So now, you know, you go throwing fists and stuff, that's a whole different ballgame, you know? So it's tough, man. And I don't think Dom did anything wrong. Obviously you can sit back and, I mean, even him, he probably knows sitting back like, hey, could have went about this a different way. But also I think maybe Shawn got a little taste of his own medicine and maybe he'll shut his mouth for once. We'll see, you know? I doubt it, but we can always hope.
But Stan, would you have been in the same boat?
I mean, yeah, totally. I mean, But I think if I'm not wrong, I think it's all started because Chad didn't want to work with him, right?
I mean, there was Boyer Co. I mean, I know Boyer Co. is friends with Shawn, and he denied it. But Boyer Co. called me on the phone and asked me. Now, I can't swear to God that Shawn knew that. I can't swear that he knew that Boyer was going to, call me or not. But Boyer Co. definitely called me and asked me like, "Hey, would you be interested in working with Shawn?" Now, of course, they both deny that now, but they've been friends for years. But that's 100% what happened. I think he's pissed at me though when I started working with Flex. Then, like he was beating a lot of these guys, Nasser, all these guys. And then next thing you know, like he never beat one of my guys ever again. And I mean, and then he retired, 2 or 3 years after. So I think that's mainly the whole, just.
Yeah, it was bitter.
Yeah, for sure. It's just the severity of, I suppose, the things he's said about you, and had that been said about me, I think that, I think you've handled it extremely gracefully, because I think that many people, Chad, many people in this industry would have absolutely flipped shit and taken things into their own hands. And
the funny thing was, like, they're like, were you upset with Dom and everything? I was like, no. I mean, I was like, Dom's 19 years old. Like, he's making his own decisions at this point. I said I was thankful that I didn't have my youngest one there, because, like, literally, if I'd had my youngest one there, like, he's the type that doesn't really talk. Like, he's just, it's fucking game over with that kid.
No, he'd have been like me. He'd have thrown hands.
He'd have thrown hands. Wouldn't even have said anything. He'd have just thrown hands.
So, I mean, that was great to get the backstory. So thank you so much for that, Chad. But I want to discuss the Arnold Classic, the actual contest, and get away from the offstage stuff. But the contest was very, very interesting because the lineup was very different. We had some really tall aesthetic guys. And I made some points in my videos that I think that it was the absolute most nightmare lineup for Nick Walker, because the other 3 guys in the top 4, they all had phenomenal quads. And that was one of the things that Nick sort of copped a little bit for. So maybe his legs weren't down as much as people thought. But anyway, regardless of that, Big Ramy finishes in 4th. He doesn't get moved into the middle in the call-outs, I don't believe. Maybe he did at finals, but I know he didn't at pre-judging. What did you think about that? Because many people sense, even Milo Sarchev, who was coach for winner Samson Dowder, and a few other top names that had vested interest in some of these other competitors, has said that Big Ramy maybe deserved a bit better of a look at the Arnold Classic, at least a better look, maybe could have placed higher. So what were your thoughts on it?
So here's the thing, like at the Olympia, we missed it at the Olympia. And so, like, he wasn't at his best. And so I can see, like, because most of these judges, they determine a look when they first see you walk out on stage. Like, I get that. And so when he first walked out on stage at the Olympia, he wasn't where he should have been. And I get moving him to the side. Now at the Arnold, whole different ballgame. Like, the minute he walked out on stage, you knew he was spot on. And so to be moved again like that, that was a little bit disheartening. But at the end of the day, we set out, it's bodybuilding. And I mean, at the end of the day, bodybuilding is bodybuilding. You're going to have your, heart broken a bunch if you think that it's going to be, what you think going into every show. But mainly we wanted to make sure that we improved. We changed a lot of the process and the protocols that we did going into this show. So it was a lot different across the board. And so we nailed it pretty good. I mean, I think we nailed it pretty much spot on where I thought we would. And I was impressed with how he looked. He was a lot more stable as far as like his conditioning from the starting point to the finishing point. So, I mean, he was really like locked in. Overall, I was happy. Obviously, I wasn't really happy with 4th place. Again, I think that, the guys were so close. Every single one of those guys had a flaw. Every single one of them had strength. I think when you start breaking it down, depending on the judging panel, it depends on what you like. And so if the majority of the panel is going toward a structural guy, then it's going to hurt him a little bit. But it's not like he's structurally bad. He's very balanced. Everybody's always talking about how big his legs are, but his upper body was bigger this time. So I felt like I felt like in the past, you were more drawn to his legs and they were more dominant in the past versus now. I thought they were a little bit more, in comparison and more balanced across the board. And he still got knocked for, supposedly having too big a legs. So it's going to be whatever the person likes at the time, really.
Yeah, I will say his legs were absolutely enormous, and it was a huge difference from a Mr. Olympia.
Oh,
Now, I heard Dennis James say on there on his podcast that Ramy said that he doesn't know why or how his legs or something like that were, that much better. But he obviously had the stem cells via IV. Chad, do you think that's the reason why Ramy's legs were like the holes seemed to be like closing up, like which is absolutely mind blowing to me. So what was it? Yeah,
like 100%. Like, so I saw it. You got to realize, like, I saw check-in pictures every week, so I saw the like slow progression, and it was kind of weird because at the beginning I wasn't really focused on the holes. I was more focused on the back because that's really kind of what he was really knocked on, was the back. So but you got to realize he didn't have any of the stem cells put in specific places. So you can do two different types. You can put it basically, intravenously, which is then it becomes systemic, or you can put it right into the muscle. He didn't have enough time to really make great progress by putting it directly into the spots that he will now. So it was basically, administered IV. So it was more of a, overall effect. I was focused on the lats, and then as I started seeing these pictures, I'm like, looking at him, I'm thinking like, man, I even asked Kim, I'm like, I think these like little indentions in the quads are getting better. And she's like, yeah, they definitely are. What did he do? And I'm like, I don't know. I'm going to have to ask him. And he's like, yeah, they just seem to be kind of closing up. He goes, they're still there, but he goes, they're not as dark, like as deep in certain spots. So they don't look kind of, I guess, as shadowed and it's kind of as deep and stuff. And then every week you could tell like they were just getting a little better and a little bit better. And I mean, even at the Arnold, I mean, they were drastically better. And you can still just kind of tell like a little bit, but very little. Like it wouldn't be as noticeable if we hadn't already seen them, the way they were before,
Yeah, for sure. I don't know if my screen has frozen on you guys, has it? Or
no?
Yeah.
Oh, okay. Well, as long as you guys can hear me, then it's all good. But yeah.
I will say he'll go now into the individual muscle groups. So what he'll do now is they will administer into the lat. He will then go into the tricep elbow area, which is one of the places he's really had a lot of pain and has really restricted what he can do as far as pressing movements. And then they will go directly into the quads in those spots. All those.
I feel like the lats and the triceps are connected. Like I've had issue at my elbow and my tricep when my lats were stuck. Or
Ronnie had the same thing. Like when we had the impingement on him and the atrophy started on the lat, the tricep went almost simultaneously. Yeah. Mm.
Xavier, are you there?
We're gonna have to take over.
He left to come back in. I got a question for you, Chad. That'll keep you going for a minute. Like, I'd be interested, how much have you changed? I mean, obviously your coaching style has changed. It's been 15 years since Ronnie, maybe even longer actually. But like, how much has your style changed, like with him versus Ramy? Like, do you still have him eating 16 ounces of meat and stuff like you had Ronnie doing?
So here's the thing. My style's always been different. Like I've always adapted to the athlete instead of trying to adapt the athlete to my style. It's one of the things that I've always done because I think everybody is individualized, obviously. Ani was a freak. Like he was just a fucking freak. So he could eat like just a ton. And it wasn't that he was a big eater, but he just needed obviously that much, food. And he was eating 14 to 16 ounces of food. Carbs. I mean, we would take his carbs down relatively low, but I mean, he stayed really consistent in the like 6 to 8 range in the off season. And then, he would drop into the, 300 to 400 range. And then even as low as 150 sometimes. But, again, like with Ramy, very, very like a much more efficient body. Like every little thing on him is just like hyper responsive. I found that out the very first year at the Arnold. When I was thinking, like he's so big, and he did eat quite a bit of food in the off season, but when we started to carb load him, he just blew up. Like he went up like almost 12 pounds in a day. Yeah. And I was like, shit.
I remember you saying that like it really caught you off guard because you just like filled out so quickly.
It was nuts. I'd never seen anything like it before. He just exploded. And so, you know, I knew like we were going to have to kind of refine and kind of change that around for the next show. But yeah, I mean, his body actually looks better on lower carbs, where like Ronnie always looked better on more carbs. Like he would take in, you know, a lot of high carbs, because we would do a complex carb and then we were also firing, you know, the simple sugars in there too. And I mean, there was times when he was taking 1,500 grams of carbs a day leading into the show. And probably could have done more, you know. I mean, it was insane. Like if we even tried to come anywhere close to that shit with Ramy, I mean, he would just explode probably, you know. I mean, it was insane.
Interesting.
Yeah, but that's always been my theory. Like you got to kind of adapt to, you know, the person. I know a lot of people have their styles, and that's, you know, and that obviously it works for a lot of guys. They you know, apply that in and, you know, probably manipulate it a little bit. But I've always been thinking like you got to adapt to the athlete. You know, you got to listen to what their body is telling you, see what it's doing, base it off of, you know, progression, trial and error. And you know, like I'm not very big on keto at all, but there are places that keto is good. You know, there are times when keto will, you know, is a useful tool to have, especially to shock the system and do some, you know.
Yeah.
Right.
I wanted to ask, I don't know if you want to answer, but like when you had Ronnie eat 1,500 grams of carbs a day, like did you use insulin too, or?
Yeah, we were definitely using insulin. Yeah. So we were using a fast acting insulin, and it depends. Like I was never big on like loading like multiple times. We might hit it twice. We would usually train all the way up until the day before the show, just very light, just kind of going through the motion. So the brain was always keying in that it needed glycogen. And then we would usually hit like the meal after that, like a big session of training and some posing. We would crank, you know, whatever the biggest, you know, carb meal was going to be. And like, again, sometimes, you know, the carb drink and you know, the insulin meal that we would use would be 750 grams of carbs sometimes. So,
holy fuck.
Yeah. And again, like his body utilized it.
Yeah. I mean, he's a freak of nature. Like
it wasn't like we were matching, where a lot of people, you know, think like, oh, it's matching like, you know, 10 grams per IU or something.
Right,
we weren't doing that.
Yeah.
I mean, it was, you know, it was a normal dose, but the carbs would just, you know, crank.
Go through the roof. Yeah. We were talking at the posing seminar the other night, and he was asking me about my protein portion, and I was like, you know, a lot are 8, some are 10-ounce meals, and he was like, you need to be doing 16. I was like, Ronnie, I'm not quite the human you are, Bubba. I don't think 16 is gonna work for me, big dog.
Yeah. I remember telling him we first started working together, I said, listen, man, this is going to be a very like kind of learning process, and we're going to kind of take it slow. And I sent him the first diet. He's like, hell, I can eat this, no problem. I go, this is the first one. I go, it's going to continue to go up. And I think we were at like 8 ounces of meat. And I said, that's going to double in the next probably 5 weeks. And it ended up taking him a little longer than that, actually, to get to that point, just to train himself to be able to eat that much and everything. So yeah, he definitely didn't get there overnight. That's for sure.
Yeah, he told me he was like 16 was a motherfucker.
And I'll tell you, like, it was that point where his body just, like, he looked one way. I got him ready for Night of Champions and stuff. But then going into the Olympia, it was when we were able to get his food amounts to a certain point. And I mean, Ronnie's a machine. So you didn't ever have to worry about him, like, you know, well, eating some, you know, good some days, and then the next day kind of taking a break and eating out and about and doing this and that. He was a machine. Like, you put it on a piece of paper, done. Like, you had to make changes, because if you didn't make changes, he just kept eating the same thing. Like, he didn't veer from that diet until you told him to make some changes. Like, he was the perfect client. Like, it was just unbelievable. You know, you knew he was going to train like an animal. You knew he was going to do every single thing you told him. Yeah, 1 in a million, man.
I assume we were talking about Ronnie there. Sorry about that, guys. My computer just totally froze up, and I was trying to turn it off, and it wouldn't even turn off for a while there. But so obviously talking about Ronnie. Now, you said he got up to 16 ounces of meat, and was that per meal every day?
Yeah. So he would usually eat between 6 and 7. It just depended, you know, where we were at in prep, and a lot of times you got to remember he was still working on the police department. So he was working through this whole time and everything. So we would kind of change it up, but it was usually 6, maybe sometimes 7. And he was always in that 14 to 16 ounces of meat, at a time. And usually carb wise, we would do somewhere in 12, maybe 16 ounces of potato, couple cups of rice. So carbs were, a little bit lower as far as that goes. But I mean, again, like in the off season, like he was pounding, carbs pretty good. So.
Yeah. One question about that, and then I want to ask a question about Big Ramy as well in terms of how much he trained for one of the last Olympias, plus also not the last Olympia, but one prior, and then also how much he's trained since. But on that protein discussion as well, I know Milosachev is a big proponent of high protein as well, but I also know that he customizes it too. Like Samson doesn't eat a huge amount of protein compared to some of his other guys. Now, do you think high protein is any, I suppose, health risk? I mean, the whole thing of bodybuilding, it's a health risk, but do you think that any of that plays a part?
Well, I mean, there's no doubt that, that's the key right there, is basically figuring out where the protein needs to be. There's no really need, if you only need 8 ounces, there's no need, to take in 12, right? So that's finding that out. And I think that's where a lot of times a coach will benefit you, because they have the eye and they can literally kind of tailor that and kind of eliminate that whole process from you having to figure all that crap out. So that's one of the things. I agree. I'm big on high protein. But again, it has to be right for that person. I have guys that eat a ton of protein, and I have guys that don't eat a lot of protein. So like Ramy eats a lot of protein, but he's kind of moderate to low on the carbohydrate, where Ronnie was high on both. I have guys that don't need that much, protein, because they just maintain muscle well, put on muscle well. Their body is very efficient. So it's, again, it's just kind of balancing that out. Is it hard on the body? Absolutely. Anything that you can do to limit, stress on the body, so it's not overly working all the time, is a benefit as a bodybuilder. That's a given, no matter what it is.
For sure. I love you say that as well, because a lot of guys will sort of move away from that and say, oh, it's not dangerous or whatever. And, you're not saying it's dangerous, but, with certain things that bodybuilders do, not just the gear, not just being heavy, but also, other things as well can be attacks on the body. And I don't think anyone's signing up to pro bodybuilding thinking it's a healthy sport.
No, exactly. But I mean, everybody has to be smart about it. I mean, it's one of those things where if you can eliminate 4 or 5 evils from the equation, those are all positive things to do. We know that there's certain things that we have to do. There's certain things that you can't get away from, but everything that you can, eliminate from that equation that's going to be easier on the body in the long run is going to be beneficial. That's for sure.
Now, Marty and Stan, I'll get your guys' views on how much protein you guys are having currently in your plans, and also when you prep and all that sort of stuff. I'll go to you first, Stan. How much are you having per meal, like ounces of meat protein?
Well, it depends. Like if I have a higher carb, higher day, like calories and carb wise, usually my protein drop a little. So like I can have like about 7 ounces, like 200 grams protein. And like on my lower day of carbs, I have higher protein. Like for example, for cod, I would go up to like 10 ounces per meal.
And how many meals is that?
I got 6 meals a day.
Yep, nice. That seems pretty standard in terms of pro bodybuilders. Marty, what about you?
Yeah.
I think you're covering your mic, man.
Oh, sorry. Yeah, eight or 10.
Yep. So that's pretty standard.
I've tried to do more. I've done more in the past, but it just kills my satiety, and then I can't eat enough carbs to keep myself like full. Like I'm always flat all the time because I'm just not hungry enough to eat the 800 to 1,000 carbs I need to be able to keep me full, wise,
Yeah. And Chad, I don't know if you do this at all. Like I'm obviously coaching people on a much lower level in general, but like if someone's eating protein and they're like, oh my God, like the protein is the thing that they can't eat over all else, and they're just struggling with it. Normally that's sort of like telling me as a coach something that maybe, they're sort of maxed out on how much protein they have. And I find that's a different amount for everyone. And obviously you probably track results with it all as well. But do you ever, get someone who's like, oh my God, this, this amount of meat is just too much and I feel whatever. And then you adjust based on their feedback as well?
100%. Yeah. So, I mean, I can usually tell based off of how they look, based off of, the feedback they're giving me as far as meals and, is the food setting, like, is it building throughout the day? So by the end of the night, you're bloated, those types of things. I like everybody to be hungry, 30, 40 minutes before the next meal so that we're utilizing everything. So the absorption rate is at a high efficient rate. So everything is, there. And when everything starts backing up within the system, then everything, starts, slowing down. So I listen to all of that. And again, like we were kind of talking about this, like every one of my athletes is different. Like they're all, I don't have anybody really, they'll use a lot of the same foods and stuff because I have, like go-to foods and stuff, but the amounts are all over the place. Some guys are high carbs, moderate or low proteins. Some are both high. Like it's all over the place depending on the athlete. Like, it just really depends on what they need, what they like. I mean, Ramy, like he loves fish, which is great. Because fish is obviously good. It's quick through the gut and everything. But again, like most people don't like fish. Most people would rather have, steak and, stuff like that. So it just depends, like, as far as the sources and where they're at, as far as like, in the world, everybody kind of gets different things. So, yeah, and I have to change it up.
For sure.
You can tell by the way they look how much protein they're eating. Like, what do you mean by that?
Just based off of how, so if I can tell, like, if it's too much and the body's starting to slow down, you start to see that inflammation in the body starting to look a little, especially if it starts to change a little bit, body's, a little bit more softer. You can just tell like everything has slowed down for a reason. And most of them will start to, notice where their appetite has started to crash. They're now having to force food because basically by the time they get to every meal, it still hasn't, the last meal hasn't cleared through the gut. So, I want to make sure that, basically everything is kind of at a point where, by the next meal, we're on to that meal, not, still have, residual effects, from the meal prior to that.
Yeah, I thought you meant that by the way someone is looking, you could tell if they need higher protein amount or less.
Yeah, you can for sure based off of, if they're basically stuck at a point. Like I've got a guy that I just changed up because for the last 4 weeks, he was literally identical. Like you could just tell, just identical, looked the same. He was in pretty good shape. Everything was good. Food amounts, they were in a pretty decent point. I asked him, how the appetite was. He said, it's struggling to get the food down, We made a couple adjustments with, carbohydrates. So we leveled the two out, backed off carbs just a little bit, raised the protein up a little bit, and boom, his body like took right off. Like you could just tell, like his body wanted to grow, but it was just kind of stuck.
Yeah.
Okay. Cool. I want to ask one more question before we get into the Arnold Classic South America, which is in Brazil this coming weekend. Marty's disappeared. I don't know what happened to him. But Josh Lenartowicz is a guy you've worked with in the past, Chad, and he's just hit 40 years of age, which is a key number now with that Masters Olympia coming up. And I think that this would be like an ideal show for a guy like Josh Lenartowicz to do. We know he's obviously had those issues with what was going on with his in his brain. I believe I don't want to speak out of tongue exactly what it was now. It was a while ago it sort of started happening. And I've been meaning to actually reach out with Josh and get him on the channel. But is this a guy that you would, in terms of his physique, people have sort of forgotten about Josh now because if you haven't competed in a year, you're dead to people in bodybuilding these days. But do you think he could come back and win a title like that and then, make a sort of second career a few years after he last competed in the pro ranks? Because he has finished as high as third in the Arnold Classic.
So, it's funny you mentioned him. So I literally have been, he contacted me about a week and a half ago.
Ooh.
About the exact same thing. So he said that he, turned 40. I know that he has put in for the Masters Olympia, and he is definitely thinking about doing it. He would like to hit that show and then possibly hit, a couple shows after it. And
awesome.
Yeah, so he's been cleared 100%. I've seen all of his, stuff. He's been cleared 100%, as far as, everything he's dealing with. Now he is dealing with some stuff that creates pain, like when he chews and just some pain that's kind of, he's dealing with the brain issue that he was at the time. But all of that, as far as health and everything, that is cleared up. He's 100% healthy. It's just he's dealing with some pain issues and makes it kind of hard to eat sometimes because I guess it's on the side of his face and everything. But overall, very, very good. And he's a great bodybuilder. Like, he's a phenomenal athlete. I know his physique really well because I turned him pro, so I've worked with him several times, and so it would be a no-brainer. We could come back very, very quickly. I think that and where he's at right now, I was really surprised because he told me, he kind of went through some tough times because Australia was locked down so much. So he was dealing with all of this shit. And then on top of that, he couldn't go anywhere and they were so, strict over there. So, I mean, it was just like a really tough time for him at that time. And now he's really got that fire back. And when he sent me the pictures and stuff, I was like, damn, he looks really good. I mean, he's definitely in striking distance to do really well and to kind of maybe rekindle the career, kind of jump off of that Olympia and then even hit into some pro shows and stuff. He's a good dude. And I think, I don't know exactly when, but he's going to, maybe I shouldn't tell it. Maybe I should let him tell this, but he's going to relocate to Dubai. So he's going to move to Dubai, stay there for a little while, train, everything, and then get ready for the shows.
Yeah, and your connection just went a little bit choppy there, but we got it. It's basically that he's going to move to Dubai or relocate there at least temporarily. And that would be huge for him because he obviously has a family now as well, and I think being in that sort of environment, you got like Benos out there, and obviously he knows Sergio as well. Whether Sergio's going to stay in Dubai after all his drama, I don't know, but yeah, he'd definitely be able to. I just think if Josh gets put in a situation like that, he's dangerous, and he's a guy that's big on that progressive overload. And it seems like when he preps for a show and off season going into it, you can just see him evolving each week. He's an absolute freak, and he's like you said, he's a great guy, and I honestly wish Josh all the success in the world. And I spoke to him probably about 8 months ago on the phone, and he was wanting. You could tell he has that want to get back into it, and I think he needed something like the Masters Olympia coming along.
That's what I noticed instantly. Like I could tell, like he's just very, very motivated, and probably after dealing with everything that he's dealt with, and then to be cleared and have a full, clean bill of health, and just kind of coming back to everything, getting back into it. I have a feeling like he's like really like ready to kind of drop the hammer a little bit and get back, kind of doing the things that he's used to doing. So yeah, it'll be good. Yeah. I think Dubai will be a great, place for him because it's big right now on, bodybuilding and training. And I mean, just as far as like being able to focus just solely, on training, I think it'll be good for him.
Yeah, absolutely. And he's a guy that also is reminiscent of Big Ramy as well in terms of his physique, because he's a guy that doesn't have a big waist, but he's a big dude. So I love that about Josh. And yeah, I think the sky's the limit for that guy. And he could be another guy we're talking about up there in the Olympia at some point, considering he's been third in the Arnold.
I think I met Josh in 2015. I think he won the Ferrigno Legacy.
Yes.
And I was competing in the men's physique. I got 5th place there.
You were in men's physique and you got 5th, and he was winning the Open at that show. That's mental. Did you get to see him backstage?
Yeah, we talked a lot backstage. So yeah, he's a great guy.
Oh, that'd be cool. Who knows, man? You might be competing against him this year at some stage. But hope you guys enjoyed this episode of Bodybuilding University. If you did enjoy it, give a video a thumbs up, smash that like button, also subscribe and hit the notification bell button. That way you won't miss out on any episodes of Bodybuilding University and any videos from Desktop Bodybuilding, including my series like Who Wins, where I face bodybuilders up against each other. Also Daily Bodybuilding News Live, where I go daily and I go live on there, and you guys can interact with me in the comments, give it likes and give your opinions as well. So make sure you do subscribe, and it'd be much appreciated. And that's it for us here at Bodybuilding University. So for all of us at Bodybuilding University and myself, Xavier Wills, we are out.